Well, hello, friends. Trisha Goyer here, and I have my friend Jaime Jo Wright. We're talking about
Hey.
the book Night Falls on Predicament Avenue.
Dun dun dun.
I'm pretty sure someone dies within the first, I don't know, 10 pages for sure.
I
Yeah,
think it's in the first or second page. Yeah.
it's right near the beginning, which
Right, right. We just embrace death around here. We're just like, we're gonna die. Let's just get it over with.
oh, okay. Jamie, Joe, tell us about yourself, and then we're gonna hear
Yes,
more about the book.
yes.
So, for
I'm just
those,
feeling.
yeah,
I was just gonna say I'm holding it up because it evens out my screen, right? A cat on this side, book on this side.
the
So
cat is
anyway,
really cute too, like really
yes.
fluffy and cute, and looks so cuddly,
Yeah,
unlike the book.
right. I know. It's like the two sides of Jamie Jo Wright right here.
Yeah, I love it. All right, start by telling us about yourself.
Absolutely. So, well, as you can see, I love cats. This is one of four that I have. So I do have a cute and cuddly side. I live in Wisconsin. I live in the woods. I love the woods at nighttime. They're really creepy, which is great. Um, I homeschool two children. I'm not like Trisha. I stopped at two and was like, yeah, I'm good. I'll take cats. Thanks.
The cats.
So Trisha's like a hero with all your menagerie of children. It's great. Um, I am married happily for 24 years, and I call him Captain Hook, and I call my son Peter Pan. My
Mm.
daughter's Tinkerbell, and I've always joked that we always kind of live in Neverland because we like to play. So we my writing is a family affair. We all do it together, and then we road trip together, and it's just a really blessed time of life that I didn't think I'd get the opportunity to do.
Mm.
So we'll embrace it because it's the kids are at that fun age of 14 and 12.
Where they don't completely like mom. Like
Right.
I have some that are like, "Mom,
Yeah.
don't look at me.
Yeah.
Mom." Yeah, we were on the
My daughter's
cruise.
getting there. My daughter's
Yeah,
getting there.
we were
She's
on the
kind of
cruise and we saw our kids talking with other kids and we like walk by slowly. They pretend they don't see us. And we're like, "Hi, hi, hi." And they're like,
"Mhm,
"Ah," rolling their eyes like, "No."
that's a strange lady over there.
I
Who's that?
don't know
I
why.
don't
That lady's
know.
waving at me.
Yeah,
Oh,
I am the mom that likes to drop my daughter because she's 14 and I'm half cool mom and half go away mom.
yeah.
And so I make sure when I drop her off at like youth group, I start screaming at her from the car as I'm
Yeah.
driving out. I'm like, I love you. I'll miss you. And then her friends send me snaps. She's like dying of embarrassment. And then I'm getting all these snap messages from her friends going, we love you. We'll miss you, Jamie. Come back to us. It's really funny. So,
That is so fun. It's like it is so fun having the kids around and
yeah.
then they can be part of what we do. So we just got back from a road trip,
Yeah.
13 hours each way to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and the
Hmm.
kids were there selling books in the booth, all the things. And so it is amazing that when we homeschool and we write books, it does become a family affair
It does.
because that's just our lives. That's what
Hmm.
we do.
Yep. Yep. So it's great. And I love it. And my daughter and my son are both not really huge readers, which is sort of funny. But my daughter's very type A and I'm not. I'm kind of fly by the seat of my pants. So she's always like running around behind me with a clipboard. Okay, mom. I'm like, keep it up, girl. I need you in my life.
Oh, so funny. I don't have that. So I just have to
Oh,
like try to keep my act together.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's all I'll say. I'm
I could
sorry.
borrow her. I could borrow her for a while.
She'd
Okay,
love it.
let's talk about Night Falls on Predicament Avenue. Dun
There it
dun
is. Dun
dun.
dun.
Okay, your books are so fun. And this one, okay, first of all, the name Sebastian is one of my favorites. So, um, introduce right away the modern day story
Yeah.
is handsome Sebastian without a shirt on and fluffy brown hair everywhere. Like
I'm
I'm
sorry.
like
I did herald a little Pedro Pascal. I'm not going to lie. I don't always have an actor specifically chosen for a hero, but I've been watching I don't even know what movie it is or show that he's got out. It's based off a video game. But anyway, I was been watching it and it was Pedro Pascal like every night and then I had to start writing the book and I'm like, and so the hero's gonna be Pedro Pascal. Okay, this is good.
So, I mean, so you have the mix of we have this bed and breakfast and this I guess we could say there's multiple deaths in the first chapter. We could say
Yeah,
that
yeah,
because someone dies, but there's a blogger, no,
right.
podcaster there
Yep.
trying to figure out what's going on, but it's also tied back to how many years before? Is it 100 years
It's about
before?
100 years, yeah,
Okay, 100 years before.
a little bit more than
There's
100, but yeah,
this something about this house,
this
something about
house.
deaths, something about
Yes.
another mystery. So there's a modern day, like what's happening, and a historical, what's happening, and then there's the handsome shirtless guy that runs in his pajamas to save the
To
day.
save the
I'm like,
day.
oh, I think I'm gonna like this book.
And he's got an English accent too. I was like, what
And
if Pedro Pascal was like English bordering on
yes,
Scottish and you just kind of throw it all together, make him a true crime podcaster and
yeah, but
it's
in the
like the
past, the
perfect
guy has
man.
an English accent also.
Yeah, he does. He
So,
does.
like, there's a lot of English
I
accents
like to
in
do
this.
some parallels in time, and it was kind
Mm.
of fun. So it was interesting. So we have a mutual friend, Kristen, who is
Yes, we
partially to
do.
blame for this book, in all
Oh, wow.
honesty,
Okay, tell me
because
the story. I'm leaning
so
back.
okay,
I'm getting
so
comfortable
this
to hear
goes
the
back.
story.
This yeah, get all comfy. I'll keep it short, but it's going to be interesting. This goes back to a couple years ago, and Kristen was sending me ideas about two characters that she thought would make a really good book, and one of them was called Mr. Anderson, and the other one, I think the name was Evie, but I've had Evie in another book, so I changed it to Effie for
I
this
really like
novel.
Effie. It's so cute. Yeah.
It's short for Euphemia, which is such a fun old-fashioned name. Like
Yeah.
now I want to have a kid just to name it Euphemia and call it Effie. No, I don't. It'll be a grandchild. That's better.
And a
Okay.
cat. Get another cat
A
and name it
cat.
Effie.
Cat number 5. Yes. My husband will not be glad I was on this podcast. um, but yeah, no, so Kristen had been telling me like, oh, I think it'd be really cool if we had this British guy and he kind of looks like the guy from Doctor Who, Matt, whatever his last name is, the actor.
I've never
Um,
seen Doctor Who.
oh, well, just ask Kristen, she'll tell you who it
I
is.
will. Oh, yeah.
And then they kind of solve crimes together. And so she was kind of going off in a different angle. And I was trying to figure out what to do for my next book when I was getting ready to write this. And I texted Kristen and I said, shoot me any ideas you have because I'm just like mind blank. She goes, Mr. Anderson and Effie. And I'm like, those are your characters. She goes, I bequeath them to you.
I love that. I but, that almost just sounded like her voice actually the way you said
Yeah.
that.
That was about how she said it too. It was so funny. I'm like, "Oh my gosh," I said, I might totally massacre everything you've envisioned." But that's where Mr. Anderson and Effie came from. And then the current day story is Nora, who is she's not recovered at all from her twin
I was gonna
sisters.
say.
I was like, recovering? No, let's just be honest. She hasn't even remotely started to recover from her twin sisters.
Like, you're gonna say "boo," and she's going to faint and,
She's
like,
kind of
almost die.
agoraphobic too. Like
Yeah,
she doesn't
yeah.
like to leave the house. She has major anxiety, major panic, and for very good reason. She was
Mhm,
traumatized when her
mhm,
twin sister was murdered about 13 years prior to the opening of the
mhm.
book, and that murder's never been solved. As the first murder that ever took place in their town, which also took place in the same house. So Nora's now living in the house where the first murder in 1910 occurred, and now her sister's been murdered. It really is truly Predicament Avenue. So,
Yeah, why would you live in that house? Why? She
well,
really didn't want to. Yeah,
she didn't want to.
they, like, set it up for her, and she got stuck there, and her parents are
Yeah,
gone, and
I
here
know.
she
Her parents
is.
are globetrotting, like, woo, we've healed. She's a little bitter. Her parents have sort of either moved on or healed. She's not quite sure. And her aunt, who owned Predicament Avenue, has now passed away. And it was her twin sister um, Naomi's wish to actually grow up and run Predicament Avenue as a bed and breakfast. And now, with Naomi passed away, Nora feels very obligated to live out her sister's dreams,
Mhm, mhm.
even though it's everything opposite of what she is comfortable with.
Yeah. And what one thing I love is that like it's split time, which I love split time novels because it's like, ooh, what's happening in the past, and then you jump over to the future, or not, it's present day, not future,
Right. Yep.
present day, and you're like so into that story, and then it goes back to the past. So like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot. This is really cool, and then it goes back to the past.
Yep.
And it's very, I would say, sometimes it seems like the same kind of tone, but they're just like back then and current day. But it seems like even the past stuff seems very more prim and proper, and
Hmm.
everyone is like, you have the people around who don't want to believe, and so in that time period, like she even starts to doubt, like, did I maybe I made it up, maybe we
Right.
didn't hear something, and so I don't know, even, like, the feel of it seems like more of an Agatha Christie olden day book, and then the modern day story, it's still, you can tell it's the same author, but it's more a little bit of romance, a little bit of humor, but
Hmm.
not, I'm like, Effie's, like, scared out of her mind, but to the reader, it's funny,
Right.
like, the way, like,
Right.
his, just I don't know how to explain it. So, great job that
Thank
it
you.
is, like, 2 different time periods, I would say more than I think I see in a lot of books, which I really, really, really liked.
I appreciate that. I try really hard because there's a big difference between writing contemporary and writing historical, not just in
Mhm.
the sound of how words are strung together to make a sentence. Like if you read a historical novel and then you read a contemporary, there's a vibe
Mhm.
because there's actually a way to write the words. I don't know how you'd ever teach it, but there just is. And then you look at the two, like you've got Effie in the past who has supposedly witnessed or been a party to witnessing this murder, but you're also in the time period where women weren't really given the credibility to know what they saw, so to speak. And
Mhm.
I wanted
Mhm.
to write a character with Effie where she was kind of okay with that. Like we see a lot of these heroines in the historical times that they want to bust out with women's suffragettes and I want to be independent. And I wanted to write Effie kind of like getting sucked into this against her will. Like she really was truly content to be married off and have a family and just be the
'Cause she
traditional.
wouldn't have known any different. If her
No,
father says, "Don't do this," I mean, you just didn't, or it's
no.
not proper, or all the things, and so it's like, she's like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe it is all
Maybe
made
I
up," or
didn't.
like,
Yeah.
maybe I didn't see
Maybe
that."
we didn't see it. And if we did, and then as things start happening that are kind of threatening to her sister, that's really the only impetus that she has to push forward
Mhm.
because otherwise she's fine kind of sweeping it under the rug
Right.
and you know and that's the thing with the that was kind of fun. So this the story idea with the murder in this house was stolen a little bit from a newspaper article I found from the late 1800s where and I love newspaper articles from back then because they wrote about crime scenes like true crime podcasters talk about them today.
I know.
I'm not even kidding. Like you wouldn't see this in the newspaper today. So the newspaper article was literally written kind of like Mr. Faulkner's house. Ah, Mr. Faulkner's house at the side of town was traumatized by the community this week when hundreds of community members traveled through the crime scene to discover. And seriously, they were opening it up like it was like like your local tourist attraction, and it was a gory, bloody scene with blood from attic to parlor. But there was no body. Like there's obviously been a crime, but there's no victim. And so it was kind of like, oh, what would happen if two women believe they saw a
Mhm.
crime, trying to convince people, and there's just really no evidence of it? And they've been kind of
And
like,
they could hear, and yeah. Oh, and
yeah,
the fact that the community like walked through the house after a crime scene,
right?
or people wanted to like clean it up. I mean, that just is strangely odd. And now we're like, no, it's going to ruin all the evidence. But I guess they didn't think about that in the same way as we do now.
No, no, they didn't. In fact, back then it was like the community would actually pull together to try to help the local authorities
Mm.
solve crimes. There was no such thing as forensics. I mean, fingerprints weren't. Nobody even really. A few people maybe did, but not a whole lot. And it really was truly like the women would try to come out and be like, I'm trying to help clean it up. But they were still insatiably curious, right? So they had
Yeah,
to
right.
put their curiosity under the propriety and the etiquette of the time and be like, I'm trying to help you clean up after this horrific event and inside a titter 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 titter.
It's just, like, so interesting. I mean, but you do, like, read old newspapers, and it was kinda like Facebook today, but they were just reporting on everything. Everything. I mean, I was looking through family members on my ancestry, and it was like, "This person died with all the children gathered around, except so and so, who thought it was too important to go out and check his horses, blah, blah, blah. And
Yes.
so in his nightshirt sat up and declared blah, 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 and then laid down, and the family wept." It was like I'm like, "What in the world? Like, why does all the family business is gonna be in the paper?" And so
Right.
that's just the way they did things. Everyone knew about
Yeah.
everything, which actually
Yeah.
kinda reminds me of the Amish budget. They kinda do the same thing today. They're not on Facebook or
Yeah.
social media, but they have scribes that write about everything in town that's happening, so
I believe it. I believe it. My husband laughs at me because when somebody passes away, my first comment is, "Well, what happened?" And he's like, "It doesn't matter what happened. They passed away." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I've read so many obituaries from the past. Like, can we get back to those where they give you the nitty gritty details?" And he's like, "Do you want people reading the nitty gritty details about, your personal?" I'm like, I don't care. We're all insatiably curious.
It's I guess
Let's,
that's what it really is down goes down to because, like, when there's an accident, all of
right.
a sudden everyone's going really slow, and my kids are like,
Hmm.
"Why do they wanna see the man on the stretcher? Like,
Right.
speed up, like, you don't
Right.
need to see the man on
You're,
the stretcher."
I know my husband's always going, "Y'all are gonna create another accident if he keeps slowing up to see this one. Stop."
Yeah, yeah, oh, so fun. Okay,
Uh,
so
yeah,
but
yeah,
I think your books are like, we're kinda getting the inside view of our
yeah.
curiosity, and so let's talk
Mhm.
about that a little bit because you definitely have a feel to your books, and it's more than just like, "Okay, this is gonna be a murder mystery," or, "This is gonna be a little creepy." There's, like, I don't know, the details you have. You've talked to before when I've interviewed about, like, you kinda see things or you see colors or the descriptions of stuff, I don't know. How would you describe your writing compared to, like, a lot of other writers?
That's a good question. Oh, I like to show my story in layers, if that makes sense.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
like, I love to tell a good, exciting story, but I don't want to just leave you with the mystery. I want to get you inside what is each character's minds thinking, what are they struggling with, and so often, and I think the same way as with real life, really,
Mhm,
what's
mhm.
going on in our lives is paralleling something that's going on within our hearts and our souls and our relationships. And so, if I can try and show all those different layers, then all of a sudden, it's not just a mystery about who died and let's catch them and try and stay alive in the process. But it's also a why did they die? And what's the
Mhm.
psychology behind it? And what's the philosophy behind it? And what spiritual implications affected it? And what relationships were changed? And how does the trajectory of the past affect the future? And I love to tell the story of when I was a little bit younger. My grandma was still alive, my mom was still alive. We were all in the kitchen one day and we were working and we were making something, baking something. My mom asked for the chocolate chips, so I went to the freezer to get the chocolate chips. And I just kind of stopped and I said, "Mom, why do you store chocolate chips in the freezer? Because I do too, but I put them there because you put them there, but they don't spoil." And she goes, "I don't know." And she turned it to her mom, my grandma. And she says, "Mom, why do you put them in the? Because I put them in the freezer because you put them in the freezer." And my grandma goes, "Oh, well, when I was a kid, all we had was the ice box and we had no air conditioning. So if you left the chocolate chips out on the counter, they'd melt. So you put them in the ice box." So I'm like looking at 3 generations later,
Mhm.
I'm still putting chocolate chips in the ice box, so to speak, because my grandmother and great grandmother did that. And so you look at how the actions from the past still influence the future, just even in that small way. And that's what I love to explore with the two time periods.
Yeah, so cool. And I think also, like, you have those generational things, but also I mean, thinking about, like, I think everyone has in their town that house or the spooky house where something,
Yeah.
I don't know, there was us when we were growing up. There's some old mill houses. So it was an old mill town, and there's mill houses where the guys used to come and work and live in these mill houses, but they were like empty since like my grandma was probably in her 20s, and so they were the old scary houses when my mom was there, and then there were the old scary houses,
Mhm.
and like sometime during your high school you have to trespass on private property and go inside the houses, and
Yep.
it's all scary,
It's a
and
rite
everyone
of
knows you're not supposed
passage.
to be in there. It's a rite of passage. And
It's a
so
rite of passage.
yeah, and so there's that. I think every town probably
Mhm.
has something like that.
Yep.
And so that ties in, I guess, the same kind of feel as with this book. Like there is this house with this generations of things going on, and so finally we're gonna get it solved to figure out what's
Mhm.
happening through the layers of time. But it's through the contemporary story, historical story tying
Right.
together. I don't know. It's just a
Yeah.
fun way. It's just a fun way. Okay, so
Yeah.
I have to note, like, was there any, without giving away spoilers, was there
Okay.
like one scene that was especially like hard to write or tricky to write, or you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna pull this off type of thing?
No, the whole book was, I don't know how I'm gonna pull this off. Um, let's be honest. I mean, when you have a cold case from like 100 years prior that somehow it's
Hmm.
always tricky because if you have a murder and it's been solved in the past, but in the present day it feels like a cold case, then you have to
Hmm.
explain why the people in the present day don't know the answers. And
Hmm.
then if you have things in the past that haven't been solved, then you have to explain why people in the present day would even know that they need solved. And so you've got this whole
Hmm.
mishmash of there were newspapers, there were things. So how comes there's no record of that? There's a lot of like tricky things that you have to like, oh, the courthouse burned down and all the records went with it. So that's why we didn't know about that. And different things like that that make it really, really tricky. But as far as a specific scene, I think the scene that was probably the most difficult was, and I'm trying to figure out how to say it without giving away spoilers. I don't think it's a huge spoiler. You have Effie and then you have her sister Polly. And
Hmm.
Polly's suffering from a condition that kind of gets
Hmm.
explained as we go through the book. And there's a scene between the two sisters where they're having to come to grips not only with their life experienced together, but also what the future might look like if their life continues on separate trajectories.
Hmm.
And that separate trajectory would be something that would really, and back in those days, whether it was death or whether you were going to Oregon from the east, once you split trajectories, you're not seeing each other for potentially the rest of your life. And so they have to come to grips with that. And so I have this conversation between the two of them where Effie's kind of like, how do we even, how do we go from here where we're at and then continue and still find an element of purpose and not be afraid. And the entire book, I've got four different characters. I've got Nora and Sebastian in present day, and I've got Effie, and I've got Polly in the past. And I'm trying to look at them all from different angles of how we view death. Like
Hmm.
some of us are afraid of death, some of us are afraid of grief, some of us are afraid to move on, like there's a guilt
Hmm.
factor, like I can't move on. And then others are just afraid of all of it. Like any angle you look at it, it's terrible. And so I wanted to kind of explore all four of those angles from different perspectives. And those were some of the difficult scenes to write to try
Yeah.
and get in those mindsets.
That's good. I think it's so good that you're addressing those mindsets, because I mean, cold case podcasts or any of those types of true crime podcasts are very popular.
Hmm.
And like one of my daughters who's 21, she loves them. And I'm like, I don't know, it would just give me nightmares. Like, I love your book. I'll read your book. Probably won't read your book like after dinner. Like, I don't know, just out of my mindset, it's just like
That's fine.
too
Yeah.
much, you know? But
Yeah.
it's fascinating. I love your book, but I don't think like I couldn't have a steady diet of
Hmm.
like all the, but she just loves it. She just loves
Yeah.
it. And then
Yeah.
she has a youth leader at church who's like, "Oh my gosh, which one are you listening to? And who do you think?" And they get all
Yeah.
they're so excited. I'm like, "How are you so excited about this?" But some people are. And then there's
Right.
some people like, "Let's not talk about it. Let's not mention it. Let's
Right.
not,
Right.
if someone dies, it's like I'm not even going to bring it up." I mean,
Right.
it's just so the extremes. I think it all is like we were made for eternal life,
Mhm.
We were made not to face the things, but at some point in our lives, we're all going to have to face things, deal with
Mhm.
things, come to grips with
Mhm.
things. And I think I love that's why I think fiction is great because we get to
It is.
explore all these feelings and all these emotions
Right.
and maybe think through how we would do things or not. And then just like, okay, we finished a
Mhm.
book. We
Mhm.
processed all these
Right.
things. So let's talk
Right.
a little bit about that because you have to process all these things first before you can help first of all the characters and then the readers
Yeah.
process all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's quite a few questions that I was trying to process myself. One, I'm like your daughter, like I can sit and listen to true crime podcasts all day. In fact, I have been. Um, and there's something intriguing to it. And so I had to ask myself, and I bring it up in the book where Nora's with Sebastian, who's the true crime podcaster, and she's trying to argue with him to the degree of there are real people
Mhm.
behind these stories, and people like you are sensationalizing them for entertainment. Like, how am I supposed to, as the sister of a victim, get behind that in any
Mhm.
way, shape, or form? And so you've got those two dichotomies. And I kind of was looking at it and I'm like, I think God really does create people differently with different
Mhm.
abilities and different sensitivities, because I my husband and I were joking, one of our outdoor cats, without going into the details, was hit by a car. And
Mm.
I was right there. This happened a couple months ago. I was right there when it happened. I ran into the house. I'm an emotional mess and I'm like, I can't, I don't know, I don't even want to think about it. And then my daughter looks at me, she goes, "And mom, if that was a murder victim in the ditch, you would have been out there taking pictures." And I'm sitting there thinking, "You're right." And then my husband's like, "Oh, you like cats more than humans?" And we have this hysterical conversation. But I think there's an element of my personality where it's like, if somebody is a victim, their story deserves to be told and figured out. Right?
Mm.
So I'm not listening to the true crime podcasts because I'm somehow loving the story of murder. It's because I feel their stories really do need to be told and I want to hear them.
Right.
And then I want to, if for no other reason, keep their deaths from being in vain by thinking, then transferring onto how do we as believers view traumatic death? How do we view death?
Mhm.
And I think as believers, um, we've short sheeted. I don't know if you ever short sheeted anybody at camp. It's really fun. Nobody knows what I'm talking about though when I say it. It's the long story, Google it. But to short sheet somebody is to give them sheets that are too short. And you try and crawl into bed and you can't
And
stretch
you
out,
can't
right?
stretch. Yep, yep.
And I think we've short sheeted ourselves when it comes to death as Christians because we really don't stretch out into it and accept it and embrace it as the comfort. Because when my mom was passing away, it was the first time I ever kind of railed at God and said,
Mhm.
I think the verse that you allowed in your word that said, "Oh, death, where is your sting?" was a complete crock, and you need to remove it from the Holy Scriptures because death
Mhm.
stings. It stings really hard. I don't like it. And that is completely misleading people. And then as I went through the process and I watched my mom, whose testimony through the whole entire trip of moving to heaven was phenomenal, there was such an expectation and a joy and a belief in the life that God had to continue and has continue. And I was traversing that along with Pepper Basham, whose brother had gone missing at the
Mhm.
time. And we both found out about her brother and my mom. It was almost within a few hours to a day.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we're on the phone back and forth. And so Pepper and I are having these tears over the phone as we're experiencing that both of our loved ones have passed along. And Pepper goes, Jamie, she says, for the first time in my life, I realize how thin the
Mhm.
veil between
Mhm.
eternity and today is. Like you can almost feel like if I could just reach a little bit harder, I could
Yeah.
poke through and I could touch. And I don't want to say I believe in ghosts, but I do believe in the presence of the Lord and the fact that there's a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us.
Mhm.
And I don't want to short sheet myself in thinking death is somehow the end and that
Mhm.
death is somehow a place to stay. Grief is real. I'm coming up on a third year of my mom's passing, and yes, there will be a few
Wow.
tears, but I'm not finding myself needing to go hang out at the grave. because she's not there, right?
Right,
And it was
right.
so funny because yesterday I came upstairs from church and I have this peace lily that was given at my mom's funeral, and it never buds. It doesn't bud at all. And the last couple of months, I've been going, Lord, can you give mom a message about this? Um, I know you're not really my cellular provider, but could you give her a message about this? And I just wanted you to tell her this. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, you know what? The Lord knows He created relationships. So I'm
Mhm.
choosing to believe that there's still kind of a connection there, even though I'm not talking to mom, I'm talking to the Lord.
Right.
And then I come upstairs yesterday and there's this peace lily in full bloom on this plant. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
dude, she texted back. She
Yeah.
texted back. And my husband's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I think the Lord knew I needed to know mama was doing really good up there. And he
Yeah.
made her plant bloom in all the glory of his creation. And so I think that's where death becomes less of a sting. And I was wrong, where it's not that death doesn't hurt, but that sting of finality isn't there when you have the hope in the eternal. And so I think that needs to be, at least in my books, that's my passion, is exploring
Mhm.
hope eternal. So that when you're going through the darkness and all the things in life that are really dark, like a true crime podcast, there's still a spark of hope. And you know
Yeah.
that there's life after that violence of death.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I experienced kind of the same thing when my grandpa passed away. He lived with us for the last 5 months of his life, and he had cancer, and we could see
Hmm.
him fading. The
Hmm.
last 3 days, he was not conscious again, but the day before he went unconscious, he was praising God, his
Yeah.
hands lifted. He's like, "Do you smell that? Look at that lion. Look at that flowers." Like he could see it.
Yeah.
And then he was unconscious for 3 days. But in the room, I'd be sitting there reading scripture and I would like turn slowly because I was sure there would be like an angel or something
Yes.
standing there. Like it was
Yes.
so like there
You can
is
feel
something
it.
over my shoulder right
Uh-huh,
now.
uh-huh,
I don't
but
know if
it's
it's
not it's
Jesus or an angel or something, but
exactly, exactly. I know, I told my dad and I told my husband after my mom passed, because I was with her when she passed away, and she had told me or asked me literally, like, the day before, she's like, "Okay, when I start to pass away, can you hold my hand and get me to the finish line? Because we're running a race. Get me to the
mm,
finish, don't make me go," like, she never liked to do anything alone, she had severe
mhm.
anxiety, and so she said, I don't wanna do it alone, just hold my hand." And then she said, "And then I know when I see Jesus, I won't need to hold your hand anymore." And we were kind of laughing about it. And seriously, Trisha, there was this moment where my dad was holding one hand, I was holding the other, and all of a sudden she took our hands and she flung them away. She
Wow.
pushed them away, like, I don't need you. And
Mhm.
it was probably within 30 seconds that we were like, she's gone. And I looked at my dad and I said, she legit let go of our hands when she saw Jesus, didn't she, Daddy?
Yeah,
She
she's
was
like,
like, I love you guys, but bye bye. I'm out of here.
yeah,
Like, you know,
yes.
and it's just so cool. And I did. I felt like if I could just open my eyes a little wider, I would have seen Christ standing there and some of
Mhm.
the heroes of the faith
Oh,
standing
you could
there.
feel it, you could feel it. We
Yeah.
had last summer, our really good friends, their son had a he dove into a swimming pool, broke his neck, and
Mm,
we thought he was just gonna be paralyzed, and he ended up
mm,
passing. He had a stroke in the hospital after. So we sat in their hotel or not hotel, in the hospital room, ICU room with them for 3 days, and it was the time that they knew he was just passing away. Like, there was no hope of him being okay. And
okay.
that room was so much peace.
Yeah.
So much. I mean, yes, we talked and yes, we cried. And
Yeah.
he's laying right here. Like he's literally we know he's not going to be okay. Well,
Right.
on this earth.
Right.
But it was like such peace that I went home and I'm like, I miss that. I
Hmm.
miss being in that room and my kids and he passed away probably 3 or 4 days after we got home from spending 3 days with them, and they're,
Sure.
like, looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "How
Yeah.
could that be how could you miss being in the ICU room?" But we just saw them this last weekend at a conference,
Hmm.
and people are like, "I'm so sorry," and they're like, "Yeah, but it was so cool in the room," and they're like
Yeah.
people are, like, looking at them, and I was like, "No, really, I was there." It
Yeah.
was like a piece of heaven was there in a way
Uh-huh.
that, like, you could like, not even a church service. It's just so different unless you experience it. So, all that to
Right.
say, like, our minds are like, "Oh, let's not think about it. Let's
Hmm.
not talk about it." But then
Hmm.
if you do have these experiences like you had, like we had with our friends or
Hmm.
I had with my grandpa in 1999, I could still, like, every moment is just so clear of the things he
Mhm.
said or what happened,
Yep.
it is like, okay, yeah, it may
Yeah.
seem like death is winning. It may seem like this is a case that's not going to be solved or whatever it is,
Right.
but there is this eternity and
Mhm.
it is real. It's just as real than
Mhm.
anything we experience. And I love that that's like glimpses of what you offer into these books when we're like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, this is creepy and scary. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I like to tell people, like, they're kinda like, "Are you writing ghost stories or paranormal?" I'm like, "Well, I think the best way to describe it is it's like if Edgar Allan Poe and Scooby Doo got together
Yeah.
and made a book, that's probably the best way to describe it."
But also with, like, truth and, like,
Yes.
going deeper, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I do like to go deeper. When I was little and I would read books, I would get sort of frustrated when I'd finish a book and I'd be like, "But I didn't learn anything. It was pure entertainment." And I don't know why a child would think that, but that's what I was thinking. I'm like, "Well, this was a complete waste of time. It was not educational at all." Probably because I was homeschooled too, and that's what's drilled into you when you're a homeschooler. It must
Right.
be educational.
Yep.
But now that I look at my own writing, I'm kind of like, I love writing. I love entertainment. Don't get me wrong. But I also love having little things that somebody could potentially walk away with and go, oh, wow. And I did get one email from a mom who said she had pre-ordered the book and she had no idea when she pre-ordered it that one of her children was going to start experiencing extreme anxiety and panic.
Mm.
And she said it was so timely because she got the book and she was like, as an escape, she started reading fiction because she couldn't deal with the emotions that she's literally going through just recently with her child. And then she got to Nora's pages where Nora's working herself through panic attacks, where she's blacking out because of the amount of anxiety.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she was like, she was stunned and she's like, "I can't tell you how timely it was. One, because you don't see that in Christian fiction very often where it's not like they need to work on their faith, but where it's like, this is real. It just is.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
It's just real. And then here's some ways we can try and struggle through it and do it together."
Mhm.
And she was like, I was so relieved to see it represented in a book where it wasn't something wrong with the person's faith or something wrong with the person.
Yes.
It was just a place where they were at, and
Mhm.
God would meet them there.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
was thankful that the Lord was, I was like, oh, thank you, Lord, that you're using it, you know?
and I always love for the one person that writes you, you never know how many people it
Yeah,
impacts that didn't take the
yeah,
time to write you or email or
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so good. All
absolutely.
right, we could talk all day about this, but
I know we
the
could.
book is Night Falls on Predicament Avenue. I just love that word predicament. It's just a
Yeah.
really cool word.
I wanted the title to be Night Falls on 322 Predicament Avenue because that's the actual address,
Yeah,
but they said it was too long. So we took out the
yeah.
322.
I like Predicament Avenue. It's so cool. And I'm listening to it on audio, and it's excellent. It's very the right amount of creepy.
Yay. I
But
haven't
then
listened to the
there is
audio yet, so I
no,
should
it's
I should listen
good.
and see who
I
did it.
like it. Yeah, I like it. But Jamie Joe, where can people find more information about you and your books and all the great stuff that you've done?
All the things. Yes. Well, you can go to JamieWrightBooks.com. My name is spelled Jaime. It's a little bit different, but JamieWrightBooks.com. And that has all my social media, everything there. Links to my own podcast, links to my newsletter if you want to sign up. That's great. Book information, yeah. But I'm everywhere. I'm one of those authors that actually likes social media, so
Yeah.
you can find me everywhere, and every social media platform's usually got something different. So it's kind of worth
Well, cool.
finding all of them.
Go look for at all the
Go
places.
look. If you like cats, then definitely go to Instagram.
Or even if you don't like cats, it's
Even if you
okay.
don't like cats, go to
I
Instagram
like
anyway.
your cats. I have dogs. I have puppies over here.
I
I
had someone
enjoy
tell me
your
today,
cats.
I don't like cats. I don't like cats at all, but I love your cats.
I know. It's like I love looking at your cats and I love cuddling with my puppies. It's perfect.
Great. It's a good gift for you then, Trisha.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.